Good evening, everyone. My name is Nikos Papasteriadis. On behalf of the Greeks, I'd like to say Momenjika, welcome, and Yassas. I acknowledge that we're on the land that was never ceded by the Wurundjeri people and pay our belated respects to all their people. The Indigenous people of Australia never invited the Greeks to this land. And no one predicted that one day some valuable alliances will be forged between our peoples, such as the joint call for repatriation of stolen cultural objects that are still housed in the British museums. Tonight we're here to celebrate Behrouz Boochani's novel No Friend But the Mountain, as well as the magnificent photographs taken by Hoda Afshar. The novel and these photographs together provide a powerful act of resistance to the war against refugees. War? What war? On the one hand, this government works hard to make this war invisible by keeping the victims anonymous and voiceless. On the other hand, it expends even more resources promoting its own violence on the innocent as an act of deterrence. However, this convenient split of logic has collapsed now. Today, as Jesse Taylor previously pointed out, there is no case for plausible deniability. We all know the information, and now we even have the benefit of artistic expression on the life in the prison camps. The war against refugees has been going on for almost 2 decades. It is abusive, immoral, illegal, expensive, and a shocking failure. I am sure I am not alone in feeling rage against the brutality that is conducted under our name. However, through the power of art, our urge to protest is now mixed with a deep sense of companionship. Companionship with those, like Behrouz, that are stuck in the prison camps. The only way I know how to pay tribute to this novel is by quoting a passage from the philosopher Simone Weil when she described the enigma of affliction in the midst of the Second World War. About this condition of affliction, she said, "As for those who have been struck by one of those blows which leave a being struggling on the ground like a half-crushed worm, they have no words to express what is happening to them. They are in no state to help anyone at all, and they are almost incapable of even wishing to do so. This compassion for the afflicted is an impossibility. When it is really found, we have a more astounding miracle than walking on water, healing the sick, or even raising the dead." The inspiration for tonight's event came from Hoda. On her return, she told me that the miracle on Manos is that Behrouz and his friends are constantly singing. Hence, with the help of our friends, we have put together a running sheet of artists, musicians, and writers. Yes, a running sheet. Not sure that that was ever part of the Olympic Games, and I can assure you that running sheets have never been adhered to in any Greek parliament. But let me get this show on the road and stick to the plan of the time by introducing a tireless activist and a joyous author, Arnold Zabel. He will man.
Well, Nikos, I endorse every single word you say. And I'd like to also acknowledge those wonderful musicians, Bart Willoughby and Fadil Suna. Thank you so much. And one thing Behrouz does is he gets together people in wonderful collaborative ventures. And that was another great collaboration, and it probably will lead to other things. That's the way it is. So I would like to welcome you all to this very special evening, an evening of celebration and engagement with Behrouz Boochani. But first I'd like to also acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. This is, always was, and always will be Aboriginal land. There is a special connection here to the work and insights of Behrouz Boochani. Behrouz has, during the 5 years of his exile on Manus Island, developed a special relationship with and interest in Indigenous Manus Island culture. And he has analysed and written about the colonial nature of the Australian government's warehousing of asylum seekers on Manus and Nauru, farming out the dirty work to others. Behrouz specifically asked for and is thrilled to have Indigenous scholar and veteran activist Professor Gary Foley deliver the keynote, and Nikos will introduce Gary soon. There have been many events devoted to Behrouz Boochani's extraordinary book since its publication in late July this year. But this evening is a special occasion with a specific focus. It's an evening in which writers, artists, scholars and musicians celebrate and engage with Behrouz Boochani's book No Friend But the Mountains, Writings from Manus Prison. And it's a celebration of many things. The power of art in its many forms as a means of resistance, the power of scholarship and informed activism, the power of bearing witness, and above all, the remarkable achievement of Behrouz Boochani, who has expressed his resistance by documenting the imprisonment of his fellow exiles of Manus Island in many forms, as journalist, writer, blogger, songwriter, singer, academic, filmmaker, poet, collaborator and activist, culminating in the publication of this remarkable book. I was first introduced to Behrouz by the wonderful Janet Galbraith in late 2014, initially to help organise a global campaign with a coalition spearheaded by PEN International and Reporters Without Borders. The campaign highlighted that here was a Kurdish-Iranian writer, journalist and scholar with a master's degree in political geography and geopolitics, who, because of his writing and advocacy in defending the rights and culture of his Kurdish people, fled Iran in fear for his safety, and yet, for all his courage, here he was imprisoned by the Australian government since August 2013 on Manus Island, kept out of sight and out of mind. Since that time, I've been privileged to engage with Behrouz as a fellow writer, journalist, activist and friend. This has included a dialogue which has explored many things, both personal and political. Themes such as statelessness, contemporary forms of colonialism, Kurdish culture, the healing power of nature, the torturous and traumatic impact of offshore imprisonment, the power of music and art in all its forms, the courageous resistance which took place in Manus prison this time last year. Today is the exact anniversary of the beginning of that 24-day resistance, and the documenting of each single death on Manus through murder, suicide, medical neglect, the stories of each lost life, how the men have mourned them, each in their culturally specific ways, and each as an act of solidarity with fellow prisoners. Behrouz, thank you for your knowledge, your collaborative spirit, your artistry in many forms, including the documentary you shot on mobile. Chalka, please tell us the time, and now your masterwork, No Friend But the Mountains. And above all, thank you for your friendship. And I'll conclude this introduction by just reading a short passage from our dialogue when I asked Behrouz about the book. Why did you write it? And he said the following. First, I would like to say that I understand this book as a victory. It's a victory against a system that is designed to take our humanity, identity, and morality. It's a victory against a system that wanted to destroy us and reduce us to only numbers. I'm not talking about myself. My perspective is a philosophical one. Just imagine a system that does not recognize us as human with the qualities of humanity, a system that completely ignores that we are human. But after 5 years, people can now read a book, a novel that criticizes them, that shows them and the world how they work, a book that is like a mirror and in many ways has control over the prism and system, people and system. Many people ask me this question, how did I start or why did I write this? I don't remember exactly when I started to write the first words, but I remember that I thought my writing of this time is like a mission and duty. I began working on the basis of this thinking. The mission is to make readers aware of this prison camp. More than that, they need to become aware of and understand the soul of this prison. When I started to write this book, I imagined there would be various unknown readers from around the world who would read it. I imagined that these readers reached beyond the generations currently present. That's why I wrote this in a literary language. I wrote it not only for this historical period or for politicians or human rights defenders or those people who are involved in this plight. I wrote it as a work that would be relevant and reveal more and more over time. I wrote this book so that it extends beyond geographical bounds and generational imaginaries. And it is truly an extraordinary experience. And tonight we are going to celebrate it and engage with it. And now it's back to Nikos, who will introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Gary Farley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnold. I'm sure Gary needs very, very little introduction, but out of respect to Professor Gary Foley, this Kumbainja academic, writer and activist, co-founder of the Aboriginal Tendency, co-designer of the Aboriginal flag, who, as is often experienced by those who walk with him down the streets of Carlton, is often interrupted by people who say, "Weren't you in those soapies? Flying doctors and the country practice?" And of course we have to say yes, but he was also, to his credit, in Backroads and Dogs in Space, and is currently busy writing the definitive history on black power and land rights. And it's with great pleasure that we welcome Gary Foley to give the oration tonight.
Thank you, Nikos, my PhD supervisor. Brother Bart, gee, I haven't seen you for a long time, brother. We go way back when we were both young. I feel deeply unprepared for this, looking out at this crowd, this expectant crowd waiting for me to say something profound. I only just finished reading this book a few hours ago. But I've been reading it solidly for the last couple of weeks. It's a very harrowing tale, an important, spectacularly important tale, which, as I think Richard Flanagan said in the introduction, it reminded him of the experience of his father in the prison of war camps in Japan. I reckon that this novel ought to be read by all Australians, all the Australians who have religiously ignored the plight of people on Manus and Nauru for all the years that they've been there. I mean, and also it also, all of those people in the media in Australia who so, passionately talk about the importance of the freedom of speech and holding politicians to account, and that's what the media is all about. I don't see that happening in relation to people who are imprisoned on Manus or Nauru. I mean, if they're so keen on their freedom of speech, why don't they speak it? Why aren't these stories being told? I mean, it was very difficult, like I said, to read this book. It brought back many memories of the time I worked on the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, the stories of brutality of the Australian prison system that I kept on hearing and knowing about, Aboriginal people incarcerated in the prison systems of Australia. The whole brutal nature of that was almost diminished by the horror stories that were being told about what was going on in Manus. The sheer brutality of the system that had been created, the fact that there's always, it's not my responsibility, I've got to talk to the boss. And there was always a boss going higher up, no accountability whatsoever. And it made me think, well, who is the ultimate boss? Is it Scott Morrison and Peter Dutton, which it is? And this brutality is condoned, encouraged by the Australian government on behalf of us as Australian people. And despite all of the bad things I've said about Australian people politically over the last 40 years or so, I know that Australian people are not like that. And if they knew, if they could read and if they could understand the way in which people are being vilified, dehumanised, the whole system is designed to break people. And what are the crimes of these people? What are the crimes these people have committed? They're not killers. They're not, people who are bank robbers or anything like that. These are people who sought freedom of some sort. And where did they end up? In a system like that. As I said, this is a harrowing book. It deeply moved me. It deeply upset me. And it upsets me even as I talk to you now, thinking about why is it and how is it that the Australian people can condone and tolerate this through their inaction or their, refusal to speak out. And one would hope that in meetings like this, and as this book gains ground and all people in here and other places encourage other Australians to read this and find out what the experience on Manus has been by this eloquent man. Not just, this is not just an autobiographical novel. This is an important prison narrative. It's a work of art. There's beautiful poetry in there. I could relate to a lot of the stuff that he says about his struggle as part of the Kurdish struggle in the long term, the fact that he had to leave his country and try and find somewhere safer, and the perverse thing that he ends up in a place like Manus, and not just him, all of those other people. The man whose father died, and the brutal way in which the system treated that man as he tried to make contact with his father just prior to his death. This is insane brutality. This is insane sadism on our part. This is being done in our name as Australian people, And like I said, it affected me powerfully because I know that Aboriginal people have gone through a lot of similar sort of stuff in Australia in the prison system. Aboriginal people are the most incarcerated people on earth. But, and in certain ways that sort of makes me realise, well, you know, it's probably ironically and criminally understandable in a sense that if the Australian people can tolerate that here, they can also ignore and tolerate what's going on in Manus. I feel very deeply for brother who wrote this book. I feel very deeply for all of the people he spoke about who were imprisoned as part of that system on Manus. I question the humanity of those who presided over that system. I question the humanity, whether the political people who constructed such a brutal and sadistic system, whether they have any sense of humanity and compassion at all. What sort of people are these? What sort of society is this if we allow this sort of stuff to go on? I haven't prepared a speech tonight. I couldn't write anything. I'm still, as I speak, standing up in front of you, absorbing the enormous implications of what this book contains. And one can only hope that everybody in this room and everybody in Australia who reads this book encourages other Australians to read it and forces Australians to find out what the reality of what's going on there is. Because, as I said at the beginning, we can't rely on the alleged proponents of free speech in Australia, the Australian media, who, you know, claim to be, you know, the custodians of moral authority, who make politicians accountable. Where is the words in their media outlets that are doing that? Where is the accountability? Where is the freedom of speech being used to reveal and expose the sort of rubbish that's going on in our name? It always comes back to in our name, folks. I mean, you know, and it's not easy for me to say that because I don't vote. But it is in our name, you know. These are our political leaders. These are the people who we, or you, not me, vote for. And as I say to my students at Victoria University, part of the problem is that all, capital A-double-L, with the exception of Lydia Thorpe, all politicians, with the exception of Lydia Thorpe, all politicians are lying bastards. And it doesn't matter, as the old Annika saying goes, it doesn't matter who you vote for, folks. A politician gets in, and that's part of the problem. And I think that people need to really carefully think in the federal election that's coming up, who created this system, you know, and who's maintained it since it was created, you know. And if you think that the choice when it comes to voting consists of two choices, well, those two choices are the two choices that created what's going on and has been exposed in this admirable book. So, folks, you know, think carefully when you vote. Go out and tell the world about this book. Get other people, get as many people as possible to read this book. I'm going to pass my copy that Nikos gave me on because I think it's important that the word get out there. The only way we can do that is through people like us and people who may gather in similar meetings like this, is to go out and make sure that other people know. Because if you think about it, the great excuse that Australians reckons that the Germans had and the Japanese had was, oh, we didn't know. Australians often say that about what's going on to us here in Australia with Aboriginal people, but Australians should not be given the opportunity to say, oh, but we didn't know. What's the point of saying that in 20 years' time when the truth is ultimately out there and everybody finally understands what has gone on here, you know? At the end of the day, let's not allow Australians to be able to say, oh, but we didn't know. It's important that they do know, and once they do know, that they've really got to do something about it, you know? To my brother, I sort of feel humbled that you asked me to speak, because I don't think I'm adequately able to convey the sort of things that probably need to be said here today. All I can do is say, I understand your struggle is our struggle, and all of the brothers and sisters who are caught up in that system in Nauru and Manus deserve all the support that we may be able to give them. And that's all the word I can tell you, folks. Thank you very much.
That was great. You know, you really nailed it, Gary. And that's exactly what Behrouz wanted. He wanted to make that connection. We're really good at imprisonment, aren't we, as a nation? And we've been doing it for a long time. And we still haven't really faced up to it. We you know, it's always, you know, my Greek mother-in-law had a, seeing it's at the Greek Centre, my Greek mother-in-law had a great saying: the camel can't see its own hump. And we don't see our own hump. We see the hump everywhere else, but we don't see our own. And we can be as brutal and as vicious and as punitive as anyone else. And we have been. But there's another side to it. There are others who reach out. They reach out beyond the cultural boundaries and they try to connect. And that's what we're celebrating tonight. And now it's my pleasure to introduce 4 people that have come together. And in a way, we formed the kind of family. Behrouz has said, this is family. And I want to introduce a few people that belong to this family. And they're now going to engage in a conversation with Behrouz. First, Janet Galbraith, founder and facilitator of Writing Through Fences, a collaborative project with artists and writers incarcerated by Australia's immigration detention regime. Janet met Behrouz online at the end of 2013, and they began working on various writing projects with a focus on creating spaces for Behrouz's work beyond Manus. The writing relationship that Behrouz and Janet have developed, particularly around poetry and story, continues to mutually impact their work. Janet has visited Manus 6 times, deepening their creative relationships. Her collection of poetry, Remembering, was published in 2013 by Walia Press. And Behrouz has dedicated the book to Janet, and I have to say, Janet today, like many days, was out there confronting the immigration department and successfully preventing a deportation taking place. Janet, you've been amazing. And I'd like to also introduce Hoda Afshar, Melbourne-based and Iranian-born multi-award-winning visual artist and lecturer who has exhibited both locally and internationally. Hoda spent time in Manus last year engaging in a project with Behrouz and his fellow exiles on Manus. Some of the results of this stunning work is on display here tonight. It's really amazing. One of her portraits of Behrouz, the one over there, has just been awarded the prestigious William and Winifred Bowness Photography Prize. And another portrait is featured on the flyer for tonight's event. And her Manus Island video installation is opening in Sydney next week at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney. And Hoda, you're already a cherished member of our family. Thank you. And Behrouz brings people together. And online from Cairo, Omer Tafigian, Assistant Professor of Philosophy at the American University in Cairo, Honorary Research Associate for the Department of Philosophy, University of Sydney, Faculty at Iran Academia, and Campaign Manager for Why Is My Curriculum White? Australasia. Omer has been collaborating with Behrouz for 3 years after meeting him online, and he translates most of his writings, most notably this wonderful book, No Friend But the Mountains. And finally, Behrouz Boochani himself, online from Manus Island. So please welcome them all.
Can you hear us? Hello. Behrouz, can you see us? Can you see us? Okay, everybody, some of the background music is, well, not music, but sound is probably coming from Manus, where there's constant sound and constant busyness, and it's incredibly difficult to find any space where you can actually be alone or solitary or do your work. So we're going to work through that sound, just like Behrouz does. Behrouz, میتونی بری یه جایی که صدا نباشه؟
من نمیشم. I cannot hear.
Can you go somewhere that there's no sound? Oh, it's better. That's better. That's okay.
No, it's okay now. Yeah.
Okay.
It's better.
So, to your left is Behrouz, and to your right is Omid. And this is Hoda, and Hoda's going to work as translator should Behrouz or Omid wish to speak in Farsi, and so she will translate to English. And also be part of the conversation. So thank you so much. It's so exciting. This event has been in the making for many, many, many months. We've been thinking about this and wanting this to happen. So welcome. I also want to thank Bart and Fadil. Thank you so much for your amazing music, and it's so special, you know. I think thinking about this book and how music is such an important part of this book, and how music has been so important in terms of Behrouz. You talk to me often about how music is the thing that gets you through being in this prison. So thank you very much. And thank you also to Gary. And this is incredibly important, I know. Behrouz, I'm going to speak for you, but I'm going to say that through our conversations, that having Gary here and having him say what he said and you two having a connection has been incredibly important. So thank you very much as well. So what we wanted to do tonight was to actually talk about this book and a lot of Behrouz's book and his interest in the way in which art and writing can be incredibly important. In fact, often more important, as Gary has said, than what we hear through the media and through journalistic work. Behrouz is a journalist. He has been a journalist for many years. He was a journalist in Iran. But he has often said to me that it is through the literary language and the art language that we can actually get close to telling this story. And that often through what he calls journalistic language, that this language often reinforces the reductive ideas of what it is to be a refugee and what it is to be in this prison camp. So I'm going to ask some questions. And to start with you, Behrouz, I remember years ago when you first started writing, and you first started writing this book, you would send chapters to Munes, and Munes has been an incredible support to Behrouz in terms of translation and also as a friend. And she would send them to me, and both of us would be absolutely enamoured by the multi-layered and song-like horrific beauty of what we were reading. I remember there were many times when you, Behrouz, would talk about the ways in which you were feeling frustrated about the way that the language of journalism that you were primarily engaged in could not get close to the stories you wanted to tell. In fact, at times seemed to reinforce mainstream reductive discourse. So, Behrouz, can you speak a bit about the ways in which you have engaged in these different forms of language and meaning making, and how you understand the differences and effectiveness of this? Did that make sense?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you well.
بهروز تو منو میشنوی صدامو؟
آره الان
جنت میگه که تمام این سالهایی که با هم همکاری کردیم همش راجع به این حرف میزدی که با اینکه مدت هاست کار ژورنالیسم میکردی ولی اعتقاد عمیقت به کار هنری بوده و اینکه میشه یه مقدار راجع به تفاوت بین زبان هنری و ژورنالیسم صحبت بکنی.
Thank you for asking this question. First, I would like to thank you everyone for attending this event. It is so valuable for me that I am able to talk with you from thank you all of our friends who made this. Actually, I think the journalism language and the media always follow the official language and official concept, and what always make me force me to think about is that the media always call us as a through the concept that the government and the power structures made about us and about this system. So what I was going to do, and still I am working on, is create a new language and create a language to break this kind of concepts. I mean, why the media and the sources call this place offshore? I have a question that which kind of process actually they are. This place as prison, and what I have done in my works, I never call this place offshore processing center. I created a new concept and I call this place prison. Or I think the journalism language, is a kind of language that doesn't have this capacity or this potential that we tell the story of man's prison and the stories of people and this tragedy. The journalism language is very weak. So that's why I think what I have done is to always criticize journalism through my works. And even in my articles, in my journalism articles, you can see and some elements of poetic concept. You can buy articles, the political articles. You can see some poetic elements, and I criticize this kind of language, and I think I create a new language which is a mix of journalism language and literature language. I am particularly talking about my journalism works, not about my book or my movie or other my works. Uh, I am talking about the journalism. So, and unfortunately, the government always use this kind of language, this kind of journalism to keep us here. And you know, I have worked with many journalists over the past 5 years. Many journalists, not only from Australia, many journalists from overseas, from New York Times, from the biggest Al Jazeera, BBC. I have worked with them, and I think the government, Australian government, couldn't keep us in Manus prison and in Naro without systematic censorship. There is a systematic censorship on Australia, and many media they try to reduce my work, or they ignore. And I only had some limit spaces in Guardian and in the Saturday paper, and sometimes in Sydney Morning Herald, or and I published my works there. And I believe that there is a systematic censorship. And don't forget that I came from a dictatorship system. I was born in Iran, so I think if we compare Iranian system with the system, the liberal democracy in Australia, in Iran you cannot write anything that you want. They put you in the jail. But in Australia you are free to write anything. But the problem is that the people don't listen to you. The people don't, they always follow the official sources, and that is a big problem. Some people in Australia think that during our process last year, I just came up on Twitter and started to work. It is not true. I have started to work in the first day, and Janet and Arnold and those people who were working with me and following my works, they know that I am working here every day for over the past 5 years. So the question is remain, why after 5 years people are listening to me? And these days some people ask me that Behrouz, every day you are talking events in Australia. For example, last night I had 2 events. They were in attend one of them and send a video. And they said, yeah, I am talking in all of the cities in Australia, in the universities. I should talk, because for years and years I was waiting for these days that people listen, that what I am trying to say, and now happen. And I am glad that I am able to talk with, directly talk with people. So I think another thing I would like to mention is that I take this issue from the media and from the journalists, and shift it and transfer it and take it to public and to intellectual places. So I think my imagination is that we are this event we are people are I think I try to take this issue from the journalists and from the media and take it to public and intellectual place.
Yeah.
And work with the artists, work with the writers, with lobbyists, with the academic people, and still we are working with academic people and with the researchers. So this point I think it's very important. And always I target this kind of people through my work, because I think for understanding Manus, this system, we need understand it in a philosophical way, in a historical way, and that's why I think we need. It is not a simple issue. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Behrouz. I think, could everybody, Behrouz, at times we couldn't hear exactly what you were saying, but did everybody get the understanding of that? Yeah, it seems like that's good. I think that leads to, and I've heard both you and Omid, and we've discussed this before, speaking about, and you spoke about that just then, trying to create a new language. Trying to deconstruct the idea of refugees and to open a space for a new language around this. For me, I feel like this book and a lot of your work, and Behrouz has worked on a play, he has worked on film, he's written numerous articles, short stories, poems, and this book. Each part of that is a part of creating a new language. The other part that I have felt over the years that has been incredibly important has been the collaboration between you and Omid. It was like when the two of you actually got together, you were able to work so closely and to understand each other so well that you were able to create a new language, which is what we have come to talk about tonight. Omid, would you like to speak a bit about that?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. It's a real privilege to be here and to engage with all of you. And I've been really looking forward to this conversation, particularly because of this issue of language and creating new concepts and a new vision for thinking about issues around refugeehood. Now, I think what's important for me is that Behrouz's writing really taught me about new ways to approach literature and new ways to approach politics that incorporates multiple layers, that draws on issues such as, or themes and topics from folklore, from mythology, from journalism, history, philosophy, and also psychological investigation as well, or psychological examination. So I think what is really unique about Behrouz's work is that he brings all of these in together and creates a new way of thinking about politics, thinking about oppression in particular, that allows for all of these unheard or ignored or marginalized experiences and feelings and notions to exist and interact with each other. So for me, it was an excellent learning experience, and I think interpreting the book over years and years will actually reveal a lot of these different layers.
Yeah, yeah. And Behrouz, did you want to speak more about the idea of a new language and trying to deconstruct the idea of what a refugee is and how you as a refugee and so many others have been spoken of, and how you've been determined to create another space for thinking about this?
Yeah, I always say this in the events that at the first days that I arrived here, actually I didn't arrive here, they exiled me here. At the first days, I was thinking that if only one individual person read my words, I will write for that individual person. And, I work on base of this thinking. It is, telling this story is very important for me. First, it is a part of my struggling. I could survive in this harsh place through my writing, because when I am writing against this system, I feel power, I feel freedom, and I am able to survive. So first is that it's very important for me, and another thing is that it's I think it's very important that people outside of this prison not only in Australia, around the world, learn from this prison. And, particularly about my book, I think this book is not only about discrete. It's not only for people in Australia. This people is for, it's very important for them, so many, and also for that how they image the refugees, how they are treating the vulnerable, and that's why I think it's very important. So actually, I forgot your question.
میپرسن که در مورد این که میخوای اون زبانی که در مورد رفیوجی ها وجود داره رو بشکنی و اینکه یه زبان تازه.
Yeah.
Oh, we seem to have come to a delay, quite a long delay.
قطع شد به
Actually, I think there are two groups of people in Western.
Behrouz, can you wait? It's breaking.
I understand this. But I am answering.
قطع شده بود صدات، الان برگشت. دوباره بگو.
Should I talk?
Yeah, you should talk. Talk.
All right, yeah. I think in Western, yeah. So in Western culture, they think they imagine, about the refugees in a very wrong way. First is that there are a group of people who are racist or who are very, conservative people. They, put the refugees alongside some concepts like terrorist people, criminal people, dangerous people, and they understand all of the refugees. And another picture is that the human rights defenders, the advocates, those people, they believe in human rights. They think in a very wrong way, which is they imagine the refugees as unjust. The first group imagine the refugees as evil and very bad people, and the second group imagine people as people. And I think both of them are what I have done in my works, and I am trying to say simple they matter, and in so many ways we are related. So there are good. They are other people. So my work, I try to break and shatter these pictures and create a new picture and create some new spaces that people think about refugees in a right way.
So, Behrouz, I'm not sure that people got that, but I know that we've talked about this many times, and I think that what you're saying is that one of the things that's really important in your work and in this book is that you break down this dichotomy where some people will think about refugees as criminal, as evil, and then on the other hand, there are the activists and advocates who will think about refugees as angels and as perfect heroes. And my understanding of what we've talked about is that you see that as existing on the same plane and that they produce the same thing. And what Behrouz is doing in his work is to undo that. He's asking you to work a lot harder to question that, because, as Behrouz would say, we are both simple and complex people. We are people. And that's incredibly central to this book that we've come to talk about tonight. I'd also like to talk, we've often had Omid in these sessions, and he's often worked as translator, as he does brilliantly. But I think that one of the things that has been amazing for me, having worked with Behrouz, is once we came across Omid, was that the relationship that they built, the fact that, as you say, Behrouz, Omid wanted to understand your soul, in that the two of you were able to do that you produced together this amazing work. So I'm interested in listening to what Omid has to say about collaboration, translation, and co-creation.
First of all, let me check if everyone can hear me. Is the sound coming through okay?
Yeah, you're fine, yep.
Okay, good. I think just talking a little bit about the process, when Behrouz was writing his work, his book, he was sending it out in bits and pieces, sending it to Munis Mansoubi, who would be compiling all of it into a PDF, into chapters based on Behrouz's instructions. Then when I received the chapters, it was basically like one long text message.
Yeah.
That's coming through?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, so when I received it, it was basically every chapter was like one long text message. There were no breaks at all. And Behrouz wrote everything. He imagined the narrative. He constructed the narrative. He developed all the ideas and the arguments and also the themes and topics. And he instructed Munis on how to compile all of these different text messages. When I received the chapters, then I had to discuss with Behrouz exactly how he wanted this to come across, what he wanted to communicate, where the breaks needed to be, at what point we had to change the structure of the text in order to make a particular kind of impression or evoke a particular kind of mood or feeling. So while I was translating, I was making my own breaks. I was making my own structure to the narrative, to the chapter, and then after discussing it with Behrouz, we started to arrange it in new ways or experiment with new forms and new styles. So there's two ways that I would describe the translation process. One of them as a shared philosophical activity. And that shared philosophical activity didn't just involve Behrouz and me. It involved Munis Mansoubi. It involved Behrouz's collaborators back in Iran. It involved Janet and Arnold, a whole range of different people. On top of that, it also involved a lot of very unique forms of experimentation. So we had to draw on a whole range of different styles and techniques, literary techniques, from Kurdish culture, from Persian literature, from English literature, and also from different forms of art and different forms of narrative that we'd encountered and we'd been influenced by. So these two aspects heavily influenced the translation process. And then we noticed through the discussions that our own my technique of translating and Behrouz's technique of writing started to transform as well while we were going through the process.
Thank you. Yeah. Behrouz, did you want to speak at all about the translation process or the collaborative collaborative process with Omid?
Yeah, I and Omid, when we first met each other through Facebook, so we started to talk and we had so many discussions, and I found out that Omid is a person with a long, he's an experienced person who work with the refugees. He understands you very well, and his idea, his perspective was very similar with me. And also, I found the Omid, actually his background was very similar with me, and I feel that he study is similar with me. So we just develop our relation, and during the working, we could know each other, and I can say that this work is deep understanding. And what is important in this book is that we understand each other very well, and it's not like this that translated in separately. So we were in contact, we engage each other, and also Omid with each other chapter, and that's why I think lucky in so many ways, because I think if I only say that only one able to translate this book in this way, it would be Omid. Yeah, I think we have very similar in so many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the other questions I wanted to ask was about the role of art. And the other night, Behrouz, when we were talking, and you said, and you were talking about this in terms of the artwork that we've done with Hoda, and also about your book, and also about your movie and your play, and many of the creative works that you've done. And you said, we can think about art as something that creates spaces for people to think. Would you like to speak more about that? And after you speak, I'd like Omid to speak a little about that.
Yeah, I believe in a kind of art that be first is that be beautiful. خدا ببخشید زیبایی شناسی به فارسی چی میشه به انگلیسی؟
Aesthetic.
زیبایی.
Aesthetic.
Yeah. First, it's that it's very important. The first element of, and second is that I believe in an art that create some spaces, new spaces for people to think, and thinking is very important part of art. So that's why I think, and also a part of it should be emotional in some ways. So and touch the heart, and which is very important. So in most, in my artistic works, I always try to, have this in my works. Yeah, I think I explained well.
That's fine. That's good. Omid, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think what's really special about Behrouz's his creative work, and even his journalism, is the fact that the kind of metaphors that he uses, the imagery he creates in his work, the structures and the techniques that he the built environment and the natural environment. So he has this really interesting, remarkable connection with the things that are going on around him, whether they're physical or they're the moods and the feelings and the attitudes of the people he interacts with. So the natural environment, the built environment, and also human emotions and human personalities basically affect the kind of language that he creates, the kind of creative work that he does. And I think this can be understood best. This is the way I understand it: is that someone who grew up in the mountains of Kurdistan, someone who had a deep connection with the land that they were on, and has this a way of existing and a way of knowing the world that's deeply connected with the ground that he occupies, the space that he occupies, the relationship that he has to nature. I think this particular aspect of Behrouz's personality, of his thinking, of his being, I think really explains what gets communicated, or what nature, or what quality his creative work takes. So when we're reading, whether it's his journalism or his novel or his space, creativity to us is deeply embedded in what's going on around him. So in other words, the abstract or the theoretical is embodied, or is has a very tangible quality to it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think that we're supposed to be coming to an end, but prior to that, I wanted to introduce some of the work that Hoda and Behrouz have done in collaboration. So many of us who have organised tonight have been collaborating with Behrouz creatively over the years, and Hoda has recently been to Manos and has collaborated with Behrouz and produced a video installation that was spoken about earlier. Behrouz, if you could just speak quickly about this process with Hoda, and then I'm hoping that Hoda can speak a little bit about this.
Yeah, actually, the Hoda, we knew each other through Omid. So Omid told me that, Hoda is an artist and she's going to contact you, and I'd say it's okay.
Thank you.
I'm a very selective person in my
Very
work.
selective.
Yeah, I have worked with many people, but for some, for artistic works, I'm very selective. So when I talk with Hoda, I found out that she is going to do a deep and deep work and meaningful work, and we started to talk to each other, and we had so many discussions and articles. So we started to work together. And what is important in Hoda's work is she did research, and she didn't want to do a simple work and a superficial work. Just, like many people that already, and we put work together, and when came to, actually we had a week time to do this project, but we were ready, so we knew that what we are going to do, which concept we are going to focus on it. And that's why I think it's very important her work with or those journalists or those people, or and meaningful work. And we started to talk to each other, and when came to, we had a week time to do this project, but we were ready, so we knew that what we are going to do, which concept we are going to focus on it. And that's why I think it's very important her work with or those journalists or those people, or those journalists or those people yeah, I'm talking about and I think so. This project show in the Sydney Contemporary Museum Street. So we are hopeful that yeah, we get some great attention from the media and also from the public and from the intellectual people.
So I'll now ask Hoda to speak a bit about this project. As you can see, her amazing works are here. Yeah.
Thank you. Behrouz, you don't need a translator anymore. As Behrouz mentioned, I got in contact with Omid and I knew I want to go to Manus exactly on the same day last year, 31st of October, when I saw on the news that after 4.5 years almost of like detaining 1,400 men in like basically caging 1,400 men for 4.5 years, then Australian government decided to relocate them to a new prison camp indefinitely without or forcing them to go back to their home countries. And I knew of Behrouz's work and I saw him on the news and I could see how broken he is, but he's still trying really hard to stand still and fight. So I thought to myself that what else we can do except going on the streets and scream, because it seems like no one's hearing us. And I thought as an artist, as an individual, I have one little platform that probably I can use that in a different way. And I tried really hard to finally get to Behrouz through Omid, and Omid said, he got back to me, he said, he looked you up and he accepted to talk to you. The first comment, like when I contacted Behrouz, was that, oh, finally an artist. I've been waiting for nearly 5 years for an artist to come here. And I was really in a rush to get to Manus Island. I thought like after that sort of like whole disastrous thing that was happening, I didn't believe that it's going to continue. I trusted that they're going to close the camps. They're going to free these people from that sort of situation. And I told Behrouz that I'm coming over, and he said, no, wait, you need to wait, we need to talk. And our conversations lasted for nearly 4.5 months, and then finally he said, I think you're ready now. And like we talked a lot about this whole ideas around documentary image making and how we both lost trust in its ability to, and journalism and documentary as a medium to communicate the true suffering of these individuals and also bring people closer to their narrative. So we talked a lot about ideas around dismantling that language and how we can sort of reinvent it in a way that it's through collaboration and trust. And it was really difficult for me to plan to go to Manus because I knew everyone said that you have to apply as a researcher, and I knew that if I apply as an artist, saying that I'm going there to make work, my application gets rejected at the airport, because I knew that a lot of friends tried to do that and they were sent back at the airport to Australia. So I had to lie at the airport and I had to pretend that I'm a tourist, and the fact that I had to lie says a lot about the censorship that exists around this issue. And I got my visa, and next day I went to the other airport, domestic airport, and Behrouz with a local person, he picked me up from the airport. I will cut, I can write a book about my whole experience of going to Manus, but I will cut it short because we're running out of time. All I can say was that we planned everything before I go there, and Behrouz is an incredible collaborator, and he's got a very amazing eye for details, as you can say through his book. That he's an amazing observer, and he knew exactly when I started telling him what I'm going to do. We talked a lot about aesthetic, and he understood it, and he, without his support and collaboration, it wouldn't have been possible for us to do the project. We're going to show a little video that we put together of the footage that I gathered throughout my trip on Manus. Like it was like little notes for me like a visual diary that we decided to put something together for tonight to show you bits and pieces of the work that we did together. But before showing it, I have to say that the restrictions on the island was for me to make work there, it was absolutely impossible, and we managed to, Behrouz knew of 2 locals that are one of the rare people of local people on Manus who are supportive of refugees, and they supported us. One of us took us to another island, and Behrouz organized for a few refugees every day to get on a boat with us. And at the moment, the new prison camps, as they call it over there, no one can go in there, and there are guards at the door, but refugees are allowed to leave if they report where they're going. And but before 6 p.m. they have to return, and if they leave, they're not safe. But the only reason that we managed to do this project together, and the videos that you will see soon, are taken on a different space, and a lot of the refugees who are in a new prison camp, they never leave the camp, and because they get stabbed and their lives are in danger if they leave without any protection. And thanks to Con and Robin and Chris, few locals who actually supported us and protected us, we could go to different spaces without Australian immigration officers stalking us everywhere. They were behind my door every day in the hotel that I was staying at. They were behind my window, they were behind the door, listening to our conversations. And when I was opening the door, I was like, excuse me, they were like, we are from immigration. So it's normal for them to stalk people everywhere. But I thought like these videos will show you a little bit of like the spirit of Kurdish people, that exactly as Nikos said, for them, not only during the years of being in this prison camp, but also throughout their resistance, like as Kurdish people, they told me that resistance history, I mean, they told me singing has been the only thing that has got them through, you know, like difficult years of a struggle. And Behrouz is famous as someone, as the only person who every day used to wake up and sit facing the fences, only looking outside and not looking behind him, and sing. And refugees were telling me that like he was always like making sound like whoa, 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 whoa. They didn't know what he's singing about, but it got him through these years. And this video is going to show you a little bit of that spirit.
Thank you, Hoda. Behrouz and Omid, is there anything else that you need to say, or shall we round up this part?
I just want to finish up by saying that working with Behrouz has been an enormous blessing for me, and I think collaborating with him has actually contributed to my own thinking and my own academic work. So I think anyone engaging with Behrouz's creative work will learn something new, not just about Kurdish culture, not just about the struggle in the detention center, but also about themselves. More importantly, it tells us something really important about the colonial imaginary that exists in Australia. So this really, Behrouz's work is a critique of coloniality, and I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned from working with him.
Absolutely. Behrouz, anything else?
I think, thank you, Omid. Actually, it is a great honor for me to work with Omid, and I have learned a lot from Omid. But in the end, I would like to say that what is important for me is that read my work, particularly this book, as a piece of art, which is very, very important for me. And don't try to reduce my work to only political. My works always, I try to, be with some different kind of layers, philosophical layers, political layers, and so different layers. And it is very important for me that people read this book first as a piece. And also, another thing I would like to mention is that, I publish my works and I did my work in a way that other people, academic people, philosophers, other people do research on based of my. I could write a simple book 4 years ago, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to write a book that people do research on based of it, and I believe that this book has something for researchers to publish, to do research, and actually it is a basic book. It is a basic book. Even my movie, I didn't want, make that movie only in a simple way. I tried to show something important and also in a poetic way that people do. I think as a novelist, I did my work. So my duty was to describe life and this prison and put it on the table. So I hope that people work on these works and publish more, which is very important. And also, even about my journalism, articles, I always try to publish my articles in the papers in a way that's by چه ترجمه کنی اینو من خسته شدم.
He's tired. Okay, بگو.
Do you want me to say what you said last night?
جنت میگه من بگم.
دو جمله میخوام بگم که من مقالات تو منتشر میکنم نزدیک بالای 150 تا مقاله منتشر کردم. خب مقالات تو با یک زبانی خلق میکنم که گذر زمان تاثیر نذاره روش. یعنی هر چی زمان بره جلوتر ارزشش بیشتر باشه. یعنی مثل مقالات ژورنالیستی نباشه که ارزشش فقط برای یه روز باشه.
Okay. He says, I wrote more than 150 articles throughout these years, but my aim has been to write them in a language that the passing of time doesn't affect it in a way that like it loses its value, but quite the reverse. I wanted it to be written in a language that the time gives it more and more value, unlike the journalism that normally the articles are born for one day and they die the day after.
Thank you very much, both Behrouz and Omid. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I also want to say thank you very much to Aref and Edris, who take care of Behrouz in an amazing way on Manus Island, and we can't forget those guys. Thank you to those guys. And also to Behrouz's mum, who gives him music and song. So thank you very much. I think we're going to Hoda's video, which will give you some kind of sense of Manus Island. Hoda wants to say something.
I just want to quickly also say that like this, the people who are in the video are two boys that are really close to Behrouz, Aref and Edris, and they're the closest people to Behrouz. And I just included those two and few shots that I took on my video. Thanks.
کاد دادم
باید دوباره آب بیاری.
بابا کجا میاره؟ آبش کم بود نه کاد دادم
ما داخل ایران هیچ مدرک و هیچ سندی نداشتیم که ما ایرانیم. یعنی اصلا اونا میگفتن که شما اصلا ایرانی نیستید، نه مدرکی نه سندی، هیچی. من وقتی رسیدم استرالیا 19 نشده بودن، یعنی 18 و 9 7 ماه اینجوری بودم.
تو زندگیم آرزویی رو داشتم که مثلا من یه شناسنامه داشته باشم، یه کارت ملی داشته باشم. موقعی که رسیدم کریسمس من گفتم دیگه همه این خاطرات بد دیگه فراموش میشه، تموم شد. ولی باز یعنی تو اون 21 سال هر چی سختی کشیده بودم کلا یه طرف، این 5 سال خودش یه طرف.
6 ماه آب نبود، آب بارون میخورد. آشپزخونه‌مون هم مثل اونم یه چادر بود که همیشه تو آفیس درش بودن، نمیذاشتن کسی بعد مثلا این تایم بره داخل. ساعت نزدیک 3:30-4 بود، خیلی تشنم بود، دوست داشتم گرمم بود، دوست داشتم برم آب سر بخورم. یه دفعه کنار مسواک شدم، میام آفیسر نبود. آفیسر گفتم برم داخل یه آب سر بخورم درجا بیام. رفتم داخل، لیوانو گرفتم، آب پر کردم، دیگه همون لحظه نخوردم. اومدم بیرون، گفتم نکنه آفیسر بیاد. اومدم بیرون، آفیسر اومد. دیدم گفت بیا اینجا. لیوانو گرفت، آبو ریخت و برد. یعنی نذاش آبم بخورم، لیوانو گرفت، آبو ریخت و برد بیرون. تا این حد اینا مثلا اینجوری شکنجه میدن.
اینجا اومدیم 5 سال با خودمون خانواده‌مون هم زندانی کردیم. الان این 5 سالی هم که ما داریم زندانی میکشیم و هنوز هیچ تکلیفمون معلوم نیست، خانواده‌مون هم دقیقاً همین حسی که ما داریم اونا هم دارن. واقعاً آزادی واسه من یه رویا شده. همیشه پیش خودم فکر میکنم که من هیچ وقت آزاد نمیشم، چون ما هیچ راه برگشتی ندارم که برگردم. خیلی سخته قبول کردن آزادی، ولی اگه یه روز من آزاد بشم دوست دارم آزادیمو قبل از هر چیز با خانواده‌ام شیر کنم.
ولی تو این 5 سال اینقدر عذابم داده، یعنی الان دوست دارم هر جایی برم فقط استرالیا نرم. تو واقعا عذابم داده تو این 5 سال.
من مال يزور يعني كملت وعشواني هديد كملت وعشواني شوري جن مالم شوري دردو درمانم شوري دردو درمانم شوري هريدي تورا دبري خين الابرين امدا شوري خين الابرين امدا شوري اري كاشكي لا ازاو اري كاشكي لا ازاو جانا كم نبوي بايارم ديدا كم نبوي بايارم اري
aman hey aman, aman hey aman, aman selaman, çerhi çaylen, çerhi çaylen, zero ilim şiman, azizem maro ilim reyman, zero ilim şiman, azizem maro ilim reyman.
خودت هم معرفی کن.
من یه چوپونم چوپون میخونم. بله.
You look like Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
You look like Jesus.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the Malaysian people, they call me Jesus. Yeah.
The human being is born enduring affliction. The human being lives while enduring affliction. The human being dies by enduring affliction. The human being realises affliction. The human being is cognizant of whatever pertains to affliction. Lamentation, crying out, wailing, weeping. The human being experiences all of these things. The human being has deep knowledge of all of these things. That night, the one night that I'm talking about, is the night when I am having convulsions as a result of toothache. I bash my head a number of times against the metal structure containing the bathrooms. I hear a faint moaning sound. The intensity and fear resonating in the sound completely stop me in my tracks. It is the sound of painful moaning. It is the sound of a man that seems to be convulsing in pain. These particular kinds of sounds makes one's hair stand on end. The prison has fallen into a heavy silence. The prison has fallen into a heavy sleep. Only the sound of crickets. They hollow out the depths of silence even further. The very great weight of the silence has infused the moaning with a destructive power. My God, prison is so horrific. Prison is so oppressive. Prison is so merciless. My toothache begins to settle. I approach the source of moaning. I become more confident that I have guessed correctly. Everything points in the direction of the solitary confinement cell called the Green Zone. There behind the fences, right by the telephone room, that's where the Green Zone is. I can't scale the fences. However, it isn't like it's impossible to climb over. It is easy to do with some effort. Even someone with the skinniest muscles could get over. But scaling the fences rattles them as well. It produces a sound that can only resemble that made by thieves who try to climb barriers in order to get into people's homes. A few Papuas and Australian officers sit along the fence a great distance away. If the fences are rattled, they will certainly become suspicious of the shaking, followed by the sound it creates. There would only be one result. I would be hauled over to the solitary confinement cell and join the one who is moaning. Scaling the fences isn't an option. I recall a time during my childhood when I was a skillful thief capable of anything. I remember the days when I used to run and jump over our neighbours' enclosed gardens with a quick 1-2 move. I leapt like a cat, pulling myself over the wall of the enclosed gardens. There I sat on the branches of walnut trees like a monkey, kilometres away from our home, there among the orchards of Kurdish chestnut oak trees. I searched for pigeon nests. By now, I am sure that anyone who could climb the coarse trunks of chestnut oak trees without a hitch could also climb the hardest and most slippery obstacles with ease. It's no joking matter. I'm a child of the mountains, no different to a cat. I have forgotten my toothache now that I am in the mood and state of being a cat. Actually, the huge leap I want to perform requires that I forget about my toothache. Yes, the mind can sometimes also consciously control one's physical pain. In 3 moves, I quickly managed to get myself onto the roof of the corridor door. First of all, I jump 1/2 metre off the ground and position myself on the metal pole that functions as the base of the corridor. It is still twilight, and focusing my eyes, I make another move with the concentration of a hunter pursuing prey. I peruse the roof of the corridor. Applying this move means that I have selected the best place for gripping my hands, and then I leap 1/2 metre and hang off the edge of the roof. Imagine carefully, exactly like a monkey that dangles off the branch of a tall tree. The only difference between a monkey and me could be that I am hanging off with the support of 2 hands, where it's usually the case with the monkey that they look ahead while hanging from one hand. By hanging from one hand, they exhibit their control of the tree, the branch, and gravity. In any case, a human being like me hanging by 2 hands is enough to feel like a monkey, identifying with the monkey more than any other animal. My hands are locked really firmly. Now is the time to prove to myself the extent to which I can embody a monkey. To do this, I launch out using all my muscles and, without releasing my hands from the roof, toss myself over the edge. The outcome of all of this is sitting up there on top of the roof, feeling a sense of achievement by completing the ascent and subsequently a great feeling of success. I'm there now, sitting there in the dark, on the roof, near the mango tree. It is a small dream of mine to reach that tree. The papu is no longer in eyeshot for me. Even the officers are out of sight, the ones I saw in front of the gate when I was down below. My God, it is remarkably dark behind the prison. Certainly the darkness expands way beyond the limits of my imagination. In fact, the ocean and the jungle evaporate into nothingness. I can't tell on which tree the crickets have nested or in which area they reside, but the whole atmosphere is captivated by their sound. The crickets, the darkness, the silence, the awe. That is the entirety of the whole scene. It might seem contradictory, but the crickets even pause for a moment from their chanting so that I can absorb the magnitude of the silence. The sound of the crickets and the sound of the silence. A contradiction. It is awe-inspiring. Tell me someone who can hear a cricket in a noisy environment. The chanting of the crickets is the harmony to the melody of silence. Silence refines its identity by virtue of the sound of the crickets, and vice versa. Every time I'm in these situations, I desire a cigarette. Forgetting about smoking means that I can stay longer. It means that I listen more to the sound of the crickets, that I listen more to the sound of the ocean, that I listen more to the sound of the night, listen more to the sound of the coconut trees. It means that I let the sounds reverberate in my eardrums.
Thank you, and just a few words to round up. I think that reading really gives you a sense of this extraordinary book, but I just wanted to thank a few people. The Greek Centre, and I'm going to list a few names here, but look, technologically, what you achieved tonight was amazing. Really was. And I say that because we've had other occasions where much more prestigious hosts have not lived up to what you achieved tonight. It was absolutely amazing. And I want to name Kostas Markos, Kostas Avlonitis, Maria Koniadis, Jorge Menidis, and Antonia Samis, and the amazing Nikos Papastagiadis. I also want to thank Gary Foley. Like I said, you nailed it in just 10 minutes. You really got it. And Behrouz will be thrilled with the words that you said. So thank you, Gary. I think you'd all agree that we had an example on stage of the family. I call it family. Janet, Hoda, the amazing work. I think we just got a taste of something like Behrouz's book, something that is going to mean that in years to come we're going to see with our own eyes what this meant. It was an act of bearing witness and an extremely important document, as well as a work of great artistry. So thank you very, very much. I hope I haven't missed out anyone. Of course, we've got Fadil and Bart Willoughby. You guys, I hope you keep collaborating. The music really, really came together well, and it symbolises something great. Yeah. And they're going to play after we conclude the evening. So thank you so much. It's been a great part of the evening. And Behrouz Boochani loves music. He loves singing. It's his life as a form of resistance. Now, the struggle continues on Manus, on Nauru, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Australia, in so many places, for the 67 million and still counting displaced peoples worldwide. And this is a struggle against those who deal in hatred, racism, fear-mongering to shore up their wealth and power. And some of them are the leaders of nations. And I don't even want to mention their names because they would just sully what has been a magnificent evening. But you know who they are. And I urge you all to buy this magnificent book and to spread the word. And I want to finish on this note. I think of all the media that Behrouz has engaged in, I think the one, apart from music, that he values the most is poetry. Behrouz, there is a wonderful moment in a book called You Cannot Take the Sky, which borrows, the name actually comes from Behrouz. Isn't that an amazing expression? You cannot take the sky. And in that collection of writings and hearing voices from Manus and other refugee voices speaking for themselves, Behrouz talks about the day he became a mad poet and how, as an act of protest, he climbed up into a tree and began demanding, bring me music, bring me Beethoven, bring me Mozart, or I won't come down, or I'll kill myself. And of course, everyone was running around frantically. They didn't want another death on the books. And he said that was the day I discovered I am a poet, a mad poet. And so I want to end with this short poem that Behrouz Boochani wrote several years ago now, which was translated in 2013. He wrote this, and it was translated by Ali Parsey and Janet Galbraith. And it's so simple, and yet it sums it up so beautifully. It's called The Black Kite. Over Manus Island, a black kite flies. A few youths, still with energy to bear the difficulties of this prison camp, made it. The black kite flies, a messenger of freedom for us, the forgotten prisoners. It circles higher and higher above the camp, above the beautiful coconuts. Our eyes follow its flight. It seems to want to tear its rope. It breaks free, dances towards the ocean, flies far and again farther until no one can see it. The youth stare into the empty sky after their impossible dream. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're just now concluding, but feel free to stay around, have a drink. There'll be food served, and the band will continue if they're free. Thank you very much all.